As a refresher, this is a summary of the combined 5.75% or $175 property tax and utilities budget that was presented to Council in November and December. The next slide will focus on the changes that have occurred related to the property tax portion, or the $88 of the budget that have come through since that time. So this slide summarizes the budget changes that have since been received. As a result of staff's diligence in maximizing revenues and reducing expenses wherever possible, additional taxation revenue was realized in the amount of $543,000. This came about as follows. BC Assessment Authority's established process to evaluate assessment changes occurs when the city submits building permit information. This process does not include changes resulting from land rezoning. Upon realizing this process was flawed, staff contacted BC Assessment, who proceeded to do a comprehensive review of any property with rezoning changes. As a result, 2 property rezoning changes were discovered to not be included and have now been incorporated into the assessment roll. This resulted in additional revenue to the city in the amount of $543,000. In relation to the business park, the eventual transfer to the city of the land related to the sports field and the buffers means the associated tax revenue is temporary. Therefore, in order to avoid creating a tax spike in the future, this revenue is being set aside in the operating reserve. This will help build the reserve to an acceptable level as established by Council's surplus policy and provide resource funding for one-time initiatives such as the pending major infrastructure projects. The additional growth revenue has resulted in changing the dollar per 1% tax revenue from $200,000 to $208,000, which generates additional revenue of $35,800. The Pitt Meadows Day fireworks volunteer fundraising plans will result in a $15,000 budget reduction. Should the fundraising efforts not be reached, up to $15,000 has been set aside in the operating reserve for this purpose. Council's resolutions from December 3rd and 12th regarding approving the 2 fire service technicians, POC backfill, and increased level of service of responding to ambulance delays and chest pain calls are incorporated here. One of the principles of Council's approved business plan guidelines document is to allocate taxation revenue from growth to offset operating costs related to growth. Therefore, staff have set aside $100,000 of the newly realized growth to assist with some of the workloads attached to the major initiatives, such as the fire hall replacement, the regional transportation infrastructure initiatives impacting the community, and the Ani Business Park development activity. And after some other minor adjustment, the property tax increase reduces from 4.47% to 4.13%, which brings the combined property tax and utilities to 5.53% or $169 to the average single-family dwelling. In other words, the previously reported increase of $175 has reduced to $169 and includes funding the increase in the type of service calls and the fire and rescue response calls and the 2 FSTs. The next 2 slides summarize the combined tax and utility increase for the single-family home of approximately 3,600 properties and the multifamily home category of approximately 2,100 properties together, which represent about 80% of the city's 7,100 properties. For the average assessed single-family home, when you take the property tax increase and the utility fees increase, the combined total is 5.53% or $169. These values exclude other decision packages, which will be coming up later on in the agenda. And for the average assessed multifamily home with centralized green waste collection, when you take the property tax increase and combine it with the utility increase, the combined total is $97, bringing the combined charge to $1,972. For fire and rescue services, you'll see by the asterisk notations, the budget has been updated from the business plan binder to reflect Council's approval of the 2 FSTs and the change in type of calls being responded to.
The only thing I would like to add, just so that the public realizes, is that about 2 years ago, we implemented the stop and start model at the CPO office. I think it's really important to mention that, because we did see a service increase there as a result of no longer were the members commuting, starting in Maple Ridge and commuting back to Pitt Meadows at the beginning and end of their shifts. So hours by member were added to the service level that we're now seeing, and we're seeing much more of a police presence now right in the Civic Center here and throughout Pitt Meadows because of that.
I guess the only other comment that I'll make is that our regional growth strategy maxes us out in 2040 at 25,000 people, which is roughly about 5,500 more people over, 21 years. And so our police to population ratio will never see dramatic increases, for instance, like Surrey or Coquitlam or even Maple Ridge, that's going to see a growth of 40,000 people over that same period, and we're looking at 5,500. So I think this is one that we can contemplate the needs of the city and how we're doing as opposed to building it in. So Councillor Meechan, did you have a comment?
Just a short comment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In their own submission package, page 151, the alternatives, the first one was to consider requests on a year-to-year basis with no strategic plan. So they actually had it as one of the alternatives in their own submission. So I feel a little more comfortable about it when they've actually put it in writing. And there's so many pros and cons to this. But given the fact that we're already in a sensitive year in terms of tax increases, I agree with everything that's been said. We hold for now.
Okay, if I don't see anybody moving on a motion, I'll keep going. Okay.
So we have 3 slides left. Up to this point, we've discussed the 2019 budget year. This slide provides council with a summary for the future 4 years. More detailed information that relates to this slide was provided to council in the business plan binder in tab 1 on page 18. Here we have shown the aggregate revenue, city department expenses for the city's service delivery partners, and the reserve provisions. At the bottom of the slide are the proposed tax increases for the future years. From a high-level point of view, the significant drivers are reduced taxation revenue from growth, contractual compensation agreements, and increasing reserve provisions.
Okay, these are our best guess estimates, clearly, and to lay out a 5-year plan. So thank you for that. And I note the tax rate projected is not what we're dealing with this year, and because of those extraordinary costs that are attaching to the city. But so I think that's important. That's
each year, we take a hard look at the budget. We do the zero-based budgeting every year, look at the ground up, make sure that we're asking for the budget that council wishes to achieve its service levels. So there's a definite strong review every year, but the mayor is correct. The future 4 years are our estimates, our best guesses. There are guesses in there, but as each year comes closer to the year we're in, then we're able to focus and fine-tune it much better than if it was the 5th year of the financial plan.
So our last item is contemplates the timeline needed to complete the budget process. Per legislation, council must adopt the tax rate bylaw prior to May 15th. So we need to accomplish this well before. We ask council to endorse these dates or provide further direction to staff so that work plans can be managed for the balance of the budget process. So just to give you a breakdown of the what was approved and not approved is basically the decision packages, the deferral of the ECOM radio system. The Bonson Road project was approved. It does not affect taxation. The RCMP additional member was not approved. The removal of the Sawyer's Landing was approved, and the discontinuation of the home show exhibit was approved. And that carries over to our total. Property tax increase is now 4.21%, and the combined increase is 5.58 or $170. And for single family, multifamily works out to 5.24% or $98.